Awesome. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our orchard grower meeting. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Anita Spears, and I'm one of the agronomists that works at Lakeside. So just a brief introduction. Again, thank you for joining us this morning. And for those of you who are joining us from afar, I thought I'd give a brief introduction for our Hort Orch team. From left to right is Kevin Lewis, myself, Nicole Arts, and Friedhelm Hoffman. Before we get going with our speakers, I thought I would just make a few housekeeping comments. You'll notice that as you joined us this morning, we have you all muted. That's just to avoid some background noise with our speakers as they give their presentations. So should you have any questions, we're going to ask that you please use the chat function on Zoom today. And after each speaker gives their presentation, we will check the chat box for questions. That too, after the meeting today, you will all receive a survey. We're asking you to please fill out the survey because as a way to say thanks for joining us this morning, we'd like to give you a little goodie bag. But in order to do that, we just need your mailing address. So with that, I think we will dive in with our first presenter, Alicia Sebastian. So Alicia joins us as a part of New Farm's team, being a horticulture sales specialist.
Just sharing my screen.
For sure.
Can you see it okay?
Perfect.
Just for the presentation. All good.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you for the intro. And I guess they put the most exciting speaker first to get everyone all pumped up for this orchard meeting. As Anita said, my name's Alicia Sebastian, and I cover horticulture for New Farm for all of Canada, but I am based just outside of Guelph. So I'm sure several of the growers on this call have seen me before on their own farm or giving me a call or sent me an email. Anyways, I am just going to do a quick update on Chateau, and then I'll do a bit more of a technical presentation on our new-ish apple scab fungicide that we have. So the update for Chateau is we are changing to a liquid formulation this year. So there's a few differences that I'll go through on the next slide. I have a comparison between the two. It's still the same active ingredient. It's still group 14. We're just changing it to a liquid formulation. It still requires moisture activation. You want to make sure that your orchard floor is clear of as much leaf litter as possible when you're applying it. If there are weeds present, you can tank mix it with a burn down product if you need to. And also want to remind that if you are applying this product after bloom, that you're using a hooded or shielded boom, just because we do know that if Chateau comes in contact with green tissue, it can burn it. It is a residual broadleaf product. It would be stronger on broadleaves than it is grasses, but you can tank mix with other products to get better control of your grasses. So to quickly just do a comparison for you guys, we have the easy formulation on the left, which is the new liquid formulation. We have the dry formulation on the right. The first difference is it's a slightly smaller packaging size. So you're getting 4 910 milliliter jugs in a case. The next one is the active ingredient concentration. So the dry formulation was a 51.1. The new liquid formulation is a 479.2 gram per liter. So just slightly lower active ingredient concentration than the dry formulation was. To make it simple, or as simple as we can for the conversion, because I'm sure there is still some dry formulation in the chain. Anything that comes from New Farm this year to Lakeside will be in a liquid formulation. We don't have any dry left in our inventory. So what one case of Chateau WDG treated, so at one case, the dry formulation treated, the liquid formulation will treat 75% of that. So the liquid case will not be going as far as the dry formulation case did. We'll hope that is clear as mud. If anyone has questions, you can put in the chat or talk to me throughout season. But now to the meat and potatoes of the presentation for Excalia. I call it a new-ish fungicide. Last year was our launch year, but we did have limited inventory of it. This year we have a significantly higher amount of inventory that we'll have for this product. So it's a group 7 fungicide. It's registered in apples for powdery mildew and scab. It's not a new group, but it is a new active ingredient. So the active is imperfluxan. This is just some of the general information about the product, but I will go into a bit more technical, and then we can talk about how, at the end, how we see it fitting into your spray program. So a little bit of background on apple scab, which I'm sure several of you are very, know a lot about already, but I just like to go over it quickly. So the fungus overwinters in the infected leaves on the ground. Then come the spring, it's the rainfall that activates these spores and spreads hundreds of thousands of spores through the orchard. It's temperatures from usually around 7 to 24 degrees that apple scab is spreading these spores. So there's not as much of a risk once we get over 25 degrees, sorry, this is Celsius I'm talking in. Usually not much as well under the 7 degrees. When it affects or infects the leaves in the early stages, this is primary scab, and then later in the season, it can change into secondary scab after a certain amount of degree days, that it will change over, and it will start to, if it's not controlled early in the season, it will start to infect the fruit as well, making it unmarketable to the fresh market. So different control methods. We have resistant varieties. We have sanitation, so removal of infected plant debris from the orchard, whether that be mowing the debris or spreading fertilizer down to break it down in the fall. But even with these methods, we still see apple scab present in the orchard. And depending on the season, it can be a lot worse than other seasons. So what do we do for fungicides? We have protectant fungicides. So there's the Mancozeb and Captan. We have Strobies, which is a group 11. We have DMIs, which are group 3s, and we have SDHIs, which is the category that Excalia fits into, which is a group 7. Some of the varieties. So this is from left to right, increasing risk of scab. So you'll see the most popular varieties that people are starting to plant or have been planting for years are moderately to very susceptible. Like ambrosias, we don't like to look at the wrong way before, or it will get scab. And also galas, Fujis, Macs are down in that susceptible variety. So we need to turn to fungicides. Some of the key technical features for Excalia is it has translaminar and it's locally systemic. So it won't move from one leaf to the other, but it will completely cover the leaf that it is applied to. And it has really good movement from applying even at the petiole, spreading out to the end of the leaf. It has pre and post-infection activity. It has a 2-hour rain fast, and it is very powerful against apple scab and powdery mildew. So just to show its systemic movement, this is a information or data we got from Valent that they shared with us. So they're applying the product here at the base, and then this is just showing how it's moving through. So the first photo is 0 days after application, then the second photo is 1 day, and then the fourth photo is 4 days after application or after treatment, just to show how it's moving through the whole leaf. Then some of the data that they did for working with this product before it was registered. So this is a trial showing, this is for apple scab, and this is for percent control on untreated portion of the leaf. So they applied the fungicide to the leaf, and then the untreated portion of the leaf was inoculated with apple scab 5 days later. And this is comparing it to other products on the market, how it helped or how it kept the apple scab away. So this is, sorry, just forgot what I was going to say. So this would be for a preventative application, not a post-infection application. We always want to be recommending to apply these products as a preventative, not a post-infection, but we do know that the season happens and sometimes you don't get to treat your whole orchard before the rain comes, or it could rain for 7 days or 5 days, and you figure that the product that you applied out there probably needs another application. So then to post-infection activity, this is a trial that was done. They inoculated the leaves, and then 4 days after inoculation of apple scab, they applied the fungicide. So if you're caught and you need to use a post-infection application, Excalia has up to 4 days post-infection. I would use this as a last resort. It's best to be applying products as a preventative, but you never know. Like I said, you could get multiple days of rain. You might not have been able to cover up the entire orchard, and it's a handy tool to have. If you're going in as a post-infection activity spray, I would always recommend that you're going in at the high rate, because you want to make sure you have as much product on the trees as possible to help against resistance management. And then here's a bit of the studies or one of the studies for Excalia on powdery mildew. Excalia is the strongest product for group 7 product for apple scab, I would say, but for powdery mildew, it's about in line with other products on the market. The difference with it is if you're going for powdery mildew, you do need to be applying an organosilicone surfactant with the application. They did do trials with a non-ionic surfactant as well, but there was about a 10% decrease in control if you're using the non-ionic versus the organosilicone. So the organosilicone is Diameter, or it used to be Silgard. That's the one that you are tank mixing with Retain at that Retain timing. With Retain, sorry. So here, yeah, this is just percent incidence on the leaves. And these trials were in the US and in Canada, in Ontario. And like I said, just about in line with other products on the market for powdery mildew. Here's the usage information. It has registered for a rate range. Like I said, if you're going for the post-infection activity spray, I would always recommend you're using the high rate. You can go in, trials were done in at the low rate for a preventative spray, and they had good activity, but we do recommend for resistance management that you should be going in always at the high rate for both apple scab and for powdery mildew. The application timing is from green tip to petal fall, and you're supposed to have a retreatment interval of 10 days, and you're only allowed 2 applications per year. So how do we see it fitting into your program? I have here the from green tip to petal fall to show through, and then below it with what we usually would be spraying at that time. So early on, protectants like Captan or Mancozeb or Coppers, so I put Parasol Global in there, is a registered New Farm product for use in fire blight or protection against fire blight. Probably at that timing though, with the colder temperatures that you have, you're probably growing in with a group 9 Excalia, just because we know it has good cold weather activity. Then a tight cluster going in with a protective. Then we see Excalia fitting in more at the pink, early pink staging time. And you want to be tank mixing it with another product that is a different group and is going after the same disease. Then probably around bloom, you're doing a different group and another protectant, and then you'll get your second application of Excalia at petal fall with another tank mix partner. I just put the PGRs on here just to show you I'm not recommending you tank mix them with the PGRs at all, but just to show you at that timing what other sprays are going out. Just to tie it all up at the end, so a bit of a review of Excalia. It has strong activity at low use rates. It's the translaminar and locally systemic. Applications made up to petal fall, you want to make sure you're providing your orchard with a good foundation for season-long control of apple scab. It is very tank mix compatible. We worked it out to be a good grower-friendly jug size, so anywhere, depending on the low to the high rate, it's anywhere from 5.3 to 8 acres per jug. And it's single site, so it gives growers flexibility in their group rotation program, and they get to decide which product or which group they want to tank mix it with. And that's it. I think I'm a few seconds over. Thanks, guys, for having me. This is just our full program that we have in, or full amount of products we have for registration in apples and how they get applied, or which time they get applied. I don't know if there's any questions.
That was awesome. Thank you, Alicia. I am just going through the chat. And it looks like things are quiet for now, but if there are any questions that come up later, we can always circle back too.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Alrighty, next on the docket is Alana Respondek. So Alana is Corteva Agrisciences horticulture specialist covering Ontario.
Good morning. All right, let's see if I can share this. Screen 2. All right. What do you see?
Awesome. I can
Is it
see
working?
slide 1. Yeah.
You were perfect this time. Everything went well.
Yay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Okay, so I will jump right in with the agenda here. So for the next 15 minutes, I gotta just sorry, it's gonna move one thing here. For the next 15 minutes, I just want to talk about the following. So the Corteva horticulture team, Diethane Rainshield update, and a quick portfolio refresher. So just to get started, I wanted to introduce myself to everyone. I started with Corteva in August. I'm the new kid on the block, and nobody really knows me because we've all been hiding away at home. So I just wanted to start, throw a few pictures up here. Most of my career has been spent in the Annapolis Valley of Nova Scotia or in Southern Ontario. I've been fortunate enough to work in several areas of horticulture, including greenhouse, small fruit, orchards, garden centers, field vegetables, landscaping, and municipal parks. In all those roles, I've had a chance to work with or be around pesticides in some form or another. So very familiar with that aspect of agriculture. In my free time, I do love to be outside hiking or golfing. And there's just a picture of me with Echo out on some trails. So I am part of a team of horticulture experts at Corteva. Lisa is out west. Justin is in the east, and Chantel is in Quebec. A few of you may have met Chantel before, as she covered both Ontario and Quebec. And so as things ease up and we're allowed to leave our houses, I'm hoping to visit everyone and jump back on farm. So let's jump into the main topic for today, which is Diethane Rainshield. What is diethane? I'm sure you all realize what it is, but a quick refresher. The active ingredient, mancozeb, group M3 with no known resistance, provides broad spectrum disease control, acts on 6 enzymatic pathways in the fungal cell to inhibit spore germination. It is a protectant fungicide, and it does control apple scab. So there are 4 common types of fungicides: protectants, curatives, eradicants, and antisporulants. As mentioned, diethane is a protectant fungicide. So what does this mean? Protectant fungicides: when a fungicide application prevents the establishment of an infection on the host crop. The protectant prevents the fungal spore from infecting the host. And decision to use a protectant should be based on previous history, plus monitoring of temperature conditions, weather conditions, that sort of thing. So as a grower, you have many products to choose from for your fungicide program. So what differentiates fungicides? Well, that would be residuality. So residuality means the length of time a fungicide continues to provide protection against infection by newly arriving spores. So diethane in the early season can offer protection for 5 to 7 days, and in the later part of the season, it could be up to 14 days. So as Alicia alluded to, apple scab, it's going to be a topic for me as well. So again, just a quick review. Everybody, I'm sure, is very familiar with this fungal disease. It infects our foliage, blossoms, and fruit. Symptoms include velvety brown to olive green spots, raised lesions on older leaves. The fruit ends up with brown, corky, scabby spots. So protectant fungicides have been common for scab control because the fungicides are meant to stick to foliage. These fungicide residues inactivate and kill the fungal spores, preventing infection. After a rainfall, a small amount of the residue will redistribute on the tissue that was sprayed. These fungicides don't redistribute to unsprayed leaves or fruit. So there is a need to reapply these types of fungicides to expanding foliage when infections are about to occur. So apple scab with protectant fungicides. So generally the following has been used kind of as a guideline for scab protection. So you begin your program, your spray program right before primary infection, which Alicia alluded to. And sometime around silver tip and green tip. You'd continue at 7 to 10 day intervals with the spray. You'd use a shorter interval if heavy rain was coming or there was rapid growth. So your protectant, you would want to protect your new growth and your fruit by replacing any residues washed off with rain. And then from first cover to August, you'd apply a fungicide at 10 to 14 day intervals. So I have some asterisks next to this last point here because we have to change the way we think about this last point. And I'm going to jump into that in the next couple slides. So diethane, as you may or may not know, was under a PMRA reevaluation a couple of years ago, and in December 2020, the hammer dropped and some changes were made to the label. So the label now contains 11 main crops. It includes revised application intervals, revised pre-harvest intervals, revised environmental precautions, revised buffer zones. So lots of changes. All these new changes become effective at the end of this year in November. So the new label, the new Diethane label, is available on the PMRA website. And if you pull it up, you'll see this box, this note, special note on it on one of the first, I think it is the first page. And so what PMRA did, so this note I'll just summarize here, it says that growers can use the old label for 2022. So they've allowed us a grace period, or they can use the new label in 2022. So either way, there's going to be 2 labels circulating for this season. So I've created a little summary table here. So, you know, the 11 main crops, I've included some other crops on this table that are not orchard related, but I just want everybody to know who's in the farming industry. You might want to go pull up that Diethane label and take a peek at it for the changes. So just to highlight apples here. So the old label is seen on the left. The new label changes are on the right in this table. So for apple, the old label was 1.5 to 2.0 kilograms per 1,000 liters water with a 45-day pre-harvest interval. The new label has a rate of 6 kilograms per hectare, 77 days pre-harvest interval, and no more than 4 applications. So there has been changes to the apples. So let's go through some of these changes a little bit here. So with the pre-harvest interval now at 77 days, I've created a little calendar here. So my suggestion is to look at your harvest dates and count backwards 77 days to get an idea of when your last Diethane spraying can be. So I've kind of, in yellow are my harvest dates, in red are my last spray dates, and the purple is kind of when we would spray for scab. And so let's, as an example, if you had an early variety, something like Jersey Max or Paula Reds, and you're harvesting September 1st, your last spray of Diethane would be June 16th. If you had a later variety, something like Ambrosia, and your harvest was October 10th, you count back 77 days. That means your last spray of Diethane is July 25th. So we all know scab season goes or could go until August. So we have to think differently about how we spray for scab. So it's something that people are probably going to have to change a little bit. The other major change with Diethane is that they've introduced a limitation on the number of sprays allowed. So only 4 sprays are allowed for group Ms. So this means product rotation is going to be imperative. You know, a suggested spray program. I mean, Alicia alluded to their New Farm's suggested spray program. So Corteva has one too. Really, it comes down to we just have to start thinking about things a little bit differently. So, you know, what about this one? Your first and second sprays are Diethane at full rate, 5 to 7 days apart. Your third spray is another group. Your fourth and fifth sprays are Diethane at full rate, 5 to 7 days apart. Your sixth spray is another group. So again, you know, thinking about things differently, we're going to have to use Diethane smartly and early in the season. The table on the right is a summary from OMAFRA, and it shows the groups of products that are available to spray for scab control. It doesn't list all the products, just the groups. And so again, rotation of product groupings is going to become imperative for scab control. So Corteva has 2 other products which could be used for scab, Nova and Fontellis. And so again, just to review, Fontellus, group 7, broad spectrum fungicide, inhibits sporulation, stops mycelium, 7 to 14 day residual. There is a kickback with it. Fontellus is able to move on and in the plant in 3 ways. It's a protectant, so it stays on top of the plant surface, forming a barrier. It is a penetrant, so it also moves to treated tissue, and it is systemic, and it moves from treated areas to untreated areas. I went backwards there, sorry. The rates, 1.5 liters per hectare, allowed 2 consecutive applications, and a max amount of 4.5 liters per hectare for the season. 12-hour reentry interval and 28-day pre-harvest interval, so it could be used later in the season. Nova is a group 3, it also systemic fungicide, a rate of 340 grams per hectare, pre-harvest interval of 14 days, max application of 6 per year. So again, it could be used later in the season. So as a summary for Diethane, again, new label becomes effective in November of this year. Corteva is recommending that growers are proactive and start to think about how their new spray program might look. So even though you can still continue using what you've always done in 2022, we are suggesting you think about the future and what it might look like. A reminder, you have an increase to 77-day pre-harvest interval, a limitation of 4 applications, and a rate change. So I just want to finish off, by stating Corteva has a full palm fruit portfolio. We have products that you can use for insect control and herbicide control. Here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out. If you want to talk apples, great. If you want to talk any other plants, I'd be more than happy to talk to you as well. And I look forward to hopefully seeing everybody in person later this year. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Alana. I will just scan the chat for any questions. And it doesn't look like we have any at this point in time. So I will introduce our next speaker. I'm sure many of you know Christy Grigg-McGuffin, but Christy is OMAFRA's horticulture IPM specialist for apples and pears.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's see here. How are you for seeing my screen?
Yes, looks good.
All good, okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome to another virtual meeting. OFPC, it was tough getting back into the virtual thing, but we'll do it. So it's nice to see everybody joining, and thank you, Lakeside, for the invite. We're going to switch gears a little bit, I think, and talk insects for a bit, which I'm down for all the time. I'm going to set my timer too, because everybody has been so well behaved and stayed on time that sometimes I get excited, so I'm going to behave myself. Okay, so I was asked to talk about scale. It is definitely an increasing issue that we've been seeing in the last few years across the province, and not just apples, but in other tree fruit as well. So there's a number of kind of questions as to why this is. Why is it that we're starting to see all of these issues? And what have been the changes that have been happening? So I've just got a couple of things here just to kind of, of maybe some ideas of why it is that you're seeing scale starting to increase. I think a significant issue is definitely our movement away from broad spectrum insecticides. I've just got glutathione listed there as an example, but thinking diazinon, the movement away from 7, all of those sort of things that typically would control some of those secondary pests. We don't really have those options anymore. So the change from the broad spectrum, we've also been seeing in the last few years, there's been a pretty significant movement from growers away from dormant oils. And especially that kind of true dormant oil timing. So a lot of people still think about that delayed dormant timing for mites, getting into kind of that tight cluster into the pink. but I'm talking about that silver tip application. And when it comes to scale, that, and I'll talk about this probably time and time again throughout the presentation, it really is the number one thing that you can do for your scale management is to continue your dormant oil program. It's difficult to do. I completely understand. Trying to find that window some years is really tough. You know, trying to deal with the freezing temperatures and all of those sort of things, but it really is beneficial. And so the other thing too is that this kind of some of the new products that we're now moving towards, they do tend to have more kind of a selective program, you know, away from this broad spectrum. And so they aren't necessarily targeting all of the pests that you're used to. They're also, some of them tend to not be as, we could kind of say, quote unquote, lethal, or they don't necessarily have as long of a residual as some of our former products do. The other thing too, I've just got the picture there at the bottom. This is an Excalia species. It's a parasitic wasp that is one of the main parasitoids for scale. And if you think about some of the products that may not have efficacy on scale, well, some of them do have some toxicity against our parasitoids. So we may be kind of disrupting the balance a little bit with some of that. Resistance scale is extremely resistant, or sorry, is extremely prone to resistance. We don't have anything to document that there's resistance currently in the province or in, you know, nothing in the United States that's been done recently, but it's still something to kind of keep in mind with why we might be seeing a boom. Also a reduction in volume and coverage, spray coverage, that when it comes to scale, you really have to soak the trees. And so if we're going in with lower volumes, then there's a good possibility that we're not really getting the coverage that we need. The other thing, I mean, we were talking about ambrosia for scab. Well, guess what? Scale also loves ambrosia too. So we're moving towards some more susceptible varieties. We're also moving towards training systems that are more prone to allowing for movement between trees. Scales, and I'll talk about in this in a sec, they're not really very mobile. They don't like to go long distances. So if we're growing trees that are closer together and very succulent and susceptible tissue, then it's very likely that we're going to be seeing an increase with that. So we've got, when I say scale, we've got a number that we deal with. European fruit scale that's common in apple orchards in the province. Oyster shell scale, you may be seeing that. We also have Lecanium scale. They're not as common, but they're very noticeable because they're so large and soft scales. But our main one is San Jose scale. And that's kind of our primary scale that we see in orchards. And that's what I'm going to kind of be touching on for the rest of the presentation. I do want to say, though, that a lot of the other scale management is very similar. There's just some variation in terms of their activity in the orchard. But if you want to talk about any of those separately, then I'm more than happy to discuss that with you. But for the sake of today, we're going to be talking about scale. So, or sorry, we're going to talk about San Jose scale. So just in terms of the biology, they, right now, what's happening in the orchard with the scale, they're in their overwintering stage, which are immature nymphs. And so they're also known as black caps. So I'm just going to switch to my laser pointer just to make it a little bit easier to see where I am. So this is the stage that we're looking at right now, known as black caps. The immature scales are just there on the trunk of the tree in various spots, trying to kind of keep themselves sheltered. Now, overwintering stage, they can withstand pretty significant temperatures. We're talking kind of they would tolerate, you know, in the -20s for an extended period of time. So before we really start to see any sort of winter kill. So I think that, you know, from a standpoint this winter, we're not really seeing the benefits of significant cold being able to help us reduce populations. Once the tree starts to wake up, though, in the spring, then these nymphs start to mature. And so you've got the males, females. I've just got some examples of pictures here. This is an example that the female, her scale has actually been removed. So you can see that they're actually just these kind of small yellow insects, but they have this protective scale over top of them. So the females are immobile. They do not move at all. And they're those nice round circles that you see. The males, they have a little bit more of kind of an oblong or oval shaped shell. So sometimes it can be mistaken for oyster shell scale. So I just want to kind of point that out. what you're actually seeing may be the males of San Jose. But the males, though, are flyers. And so there's just a little picture here of them, very distinct. If you ever are looking under a hand lens, the best thing that you can do to see them, because they are so small, is to look for the band across the abdomen. It really does stand out under a hand lens. But the thing with the males is that while they do fly, they don't fly far. So that's why it tends to be that scale infestations are very sporadic and in pockets throughout the orchard, and they kind of spread slowly from tree to tree. Oftentimes the males actually just walk. So it's wherever they can get to the females. So that's why you tend to only see it in a few trees at a time, and then that slow spread happens. Now, the thing with females, now did I just lose my ability to move? I'll do that. The thing with the females is that they produce live young. And as you can see from this number here, we're talking 10 crawlers a day. And if they have a lifespan of 6 weeks, that's a pretty significant number of crawlers that get released per generation. So the crawlers are the mobile stage. So they're what are going to move through the tree. They tend to move upwards. So you're going to see that movement up the trunk. You're going to see a lot of things happening in the upper canopy first as it moves down the tree from there once the populations build. But it really doesn't take long for these populations to build up. So this is just kind of a picture. I'm not sure if you can see. You might have to get your nose right against the screen to see some of these crawlers. So they're very small, about the size, I'd say, of kind of the tip of a ballpoint pen. And again, you'll see these moving through the canopy. You do have to get up close and personal, though, to the tree to be able to see it. So it does take it's pretty laborious to try and monitor for them. But it is important. I'm going to talk about timing. It is important to know when these crawlers are active. So I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with the damage. These are kind of some severe cases with it. But typical damage is this, the red halos on the fruit that you'll see. This is from a toxin in their saliva. As they start to attach, then they start to secrete this toxin. And this is the response that happens in the fruit. So you get the red halos. Depending on when the damage happens, early season, you can get this deformity that starts to happen on the fruit as well, if it remains on the tree. So you get the same sort of patterns that happen too on the branches and trunk itself, if that's where the feeding is going to be happening. I like to take a spray bottle through the orchard. You could also kind of take a walk through after a nice rain when it's really soaked off the trees, and you can see that kind of spotting that happens. Almost looks like measles that the tree's showing. And you can see from this top picture too, again, that the toxin is moving through the tree itself, and you can see that purple discoloration that happens in the cambium layer. And unfortunately, it does lead to limb dieback as well as tree death if these populations get severe enough. So it's happened in a number of orchards that I've seen when things really get out of hand. So it does need some pretty intensive management. So in terms of monitoring, now the timeline for when these guys kind of start showing up. So as I said, they're overwintering right now as immature nymphs. So once the tree wakes up, they're going to start maturing. They're going to start at that point in time. Right now, they have a very thin layer of scale or of shell over top of their bodies. Once they start to mature, that's going to get much thicker. So by the time they're mature adults, then they've got this nice protective covering over it. That's why dormant oil is so key, because you're getting it on before they get that thick covering. But the adults, the males are going to start flying typically around late pink and over bloom. And from there, then you're going to get the development of the crawlers. And I'll show another graph in just a moment, but usually it's about early to mid-June. Early June in the early areas of the province, and it goes into late June depending on where you are. But that usually is kind of the timing when the crawlers first start to emerge. And their activity can be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So it really is a long period of time that you have those active crawlers around, moving towards all of the new developing tissue. And there are 2 generations. So the first generation, the crawler emergence is quite synchronous. So you usually get kind of a peak emergence about a week or so following that first emergence. Whereas the second generation crawler emergence, it can be quite long and rather asynchronous. So in that you're going to have kind of a continuation of adult flight, a continuation of crawler emergence, and that can go right up until harvest. I've seen active crawlers on ambrosia as it's being harvested. So so it continues for as long as the populations are there. Now, so as I mentioned that we tend to in Ontario, based on our monitoring in the last few years, that we usually see that peak kind of happening early to mid-June for that first generation. And then the second generation is usually about late July in the earliest regions of the province, but typically early August is when we usually see a lot of activity. And then again, that continues until harvest. I do just want to highlight, this is just kind of an example of some trap catches. I just want to bring kind of the attention to the scale of these graphs themselves. So this is the first generation, and you can see the number of adults that are trapped per day versus the second generation gets up into the hundreds. So it's just pretty, I want to kind of push home the importance of that early intervention, because those populations, again, if females producing 500 young per generation, then that can really increase exponentially if it's left uncontrolled. So that early intervention is really important for scale management. Now, in terms of monitoring, there are pheromone traps that are available to monitor for males. This is an example of what one looks like. You can see these little circles here, these dots that are inside the circles, that's the size of the scale. So extremely small. If you're just looking at it with the naked eye, it looks kind of like a speck of dirt, and it's pretty hard to differentiate it between some dust that gets collected. But so you definitely do, if you're using a pheromone trap, you definitely do need to have access to a hand lens or a microscope to be able to identify, again, what these males look like with the distinct band across the abdomen. But you'd hang these traps ideally in the lower scaffolds of a tree that you know is infested with scale, or that is in kind of a hotspot area of scale, so that you can really maximize your abilities to trap, your success with trapping. The other way of monitoring as well is to monitor for those crawlers themselves to identify their timing. And a lot of times this is done with the use of electrical tape. So it's a pretty cheap and easy way to do it. I say easy in that it's easy to put it up, but it takes a lot of maintenance. So you can see this kind of a close up here. All of these little kind of specks on here are all the individual crawlers. I have to change, when we're monitoring for crawlers, we're changing the traps, if not every day, every other day. And that's especially in areas where you have a much more open canopy. If you're in areas where there's a pretty strong and consistent winds, if you have sandy soils, just because this is electrical tape sticky side out, so it's going to collect anything and everything that's blowing through the orchard. And it loses its stickiness, quote unquote stickiness, pretty quickly. And so, I mean, I've got videos of the crawlers just walking right past it, right? So it's definitely something that does require a lot of maintenance, but the feedback that it gives you is pretty effective. So now those can be used, the use of the pheromone traps can be used to run some degree day models. There are some that are present. So the first two that you see here, model A and B, that's based off of models that are used in New York. So the first one makes use of a March 1st biofix. So you start generating your degree days March 1st and on, whereas the second one is actually looking at the biofix of the adult catch. So you're putting those traps up at pink timing. And then as soon as you start to catch your first male flyers, then that's when you start your models. And you restart then for the second generation. So the biofix is based on the second generation adult flight. We've been running these models for quite a few years now. And so I've just got at the bottom kind of an example of using the March 1st model from New York, that a lot of times our observations of crawlers really do fall into kind of a similar range as to what the New York model predicts. So I do think that they're very effective for being able to kind of time it if you're looking for those summer sprays. So the important thing then, all of that said, we're getting into the management side of things. So I can't stress enough the effectiveness of dormant oil and the importance of it. So oil works as a suffocant. So it's all about trying to get a nice thick layer over the immature nymphs before they start to get that protective shell, because that's going to prevent any sort of respiration that is going to start to kick up their gear once they start to wake up in the spring. So as soon as they start to respirate, you've got that layer over top before they have the ability to get the thick shell, and it prevents any sort of development from continuing. So trying to get this dormant oil on when you have a window that is ideal for applying oil, between silvertip and half-inch green. Now, if you do push it back to a delayed dormant timing, if you're going for your mites as well, you will get some efficacy against scale. But if scale is your number one problem, then I want you to think about really trying to aim for that true dormant spray to really maximize the efficacy. Just because by the time you get into tight cluster pink timing, then they're well developed. And so trying to prevent any sort of movement is touch and go at times. So you've got your dormant oil on then. If you do have high pressure scale, then I do suggest an aggressive program for a number of years. Once you seem to get scale under control, then I think a maintenance of dormant oil is all you need. But if you are seeing activity in there and you're seeing damage with the harvest assessments, then it is best to think about also doing some summertime controls. So I've got listed here what we have registered. Our kind of heavy hitters are Momento, Closer, Twin Guard, and Cevanto. Now, when it comes to application timing, I just want to highlight that Momento is slower acting. So you want to think about putting that on before crawler emergence starts, which is why running those degree day models is really effective, because it does give you some idea. You can kind of estimate when you would start to see those crawlers, and you can get things on beforehand. If you don't run those models, but you still want to have Momento on, I would suggest probably timing for that early June application. You've got a pretty good chance of having it in place and active by the time the scale emerge. So having that on, in terms of Closer, Twin Guard, Cevanto, those are at the crawler when they are active. So timing that is important as well. In all cases, as I mentioned, because crawlers are active for 4 to 6 weeks, then reapplying is really critical. So going back in about 2 weeks later and reapplying is good. If you decide that you only want to do one application, maybe timing for just that peak emergence, so about a week after crawler emergence starts, putting something on. And if you're doing something like Momento, thinking about a higher rate if you're just going on with one application. There are summer oils as well as insecticidal soaps that are available. I do want to just highlight that the pure spray oil and suffix oil, they aren't actually registered for summer use of scale, but you can use them for mites and get the benefit of scale. But those need to be going on every couple of weeks. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through these. This is just some examples. As I said, we've been doing efficacy trials for many years now. And so this is just some indication of kind of the success and failures of some of these things. The graph on the left, this, I just want to identify the green here. This is pure spray, green used alone. And so this just kind of reinforces the importance of applying it every 2 weeks. This was put on at the initial crawler emergence. And you can see that we get a little bit of escape in the years following. But a Momento program and a dormant oil program both kept crawlers quite minimal. Damage quite minimal. So now the graph on the right is looking at comparing Closer to Momento, again, a target of the first crawler activity. And you can see that Momento does tend to have a bit longer of a residual compared to some of the other products, but all equally effective. So this other is looking at, instead of Closer, we're comparing Momento to Cevanto Prime. And now this one, I just want to explain this a little bit, because Cevanto Prime and Momento were applied targeting that first generation crawler emergence. And that's what we're seeing here in terms of the damage following that application. You can see that the escapes start to happen with Cevanto Prime a little bit sooner than Momento. So again, it is important to have some sort of second generation control with that. This green bar, why this starts to show up is because then with that first generation treated Momento block, we took half of that and we sprayed it with the second generation with Cevanto Prime. So first generation Momento, second generation Cevanto, and you can really see that it does help to keep those populations knocked down. So with a high pressure block, again, thinking that aggressive control with the first and second generation. Quick comments that we do have beneficials. So thinking about your the level of toxicity of your summertime insecticide programs is really important. You can check out in Publication 360, we do have the toxicity table that goes through some of their, our kind of more common predators and parasitoids in orchards. So you can get a sense of what products have kind of the most efficacy against that. The last thing that I just want to identify that I'm thinking is pretty exciting is that there's some new research that's coming out that's identifying the effectiveness of mating disruption for San Jose scale. We don't have the dispensers currently available yet, but Trace, the company that does a lot of our pheromones and mating disruption products, they're in the midst of developing a product. So I'm hoping to see that on the market very soon. Work out of Michigan State University has been looking at the effectiveness, and it seems like there's really strong trap shutdown that they're getting in mating disruption blocks. You can see this is now the graphs are in cherry orchards, but they are seeing similar results in apples as well. The dashed line is the grower standard block compared to the solid lines, which are their mating disruption. So they're seeing total trap shutdown, and with as well the possibility of carryover too in the following years. So even if you don't use mating disruption the following year, that you're still getting that strong control. So really exciting to see that. Stay tuned, because hopefully we see that on the market very soon. And I'll just leave that. I see my time is up. So I'll leave the summary page on just for you to peruse at your own pleasure. But let me know if anybody has any questions.
Alrighty. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to get a coffee or run to the bathroom. So next up we have Bsf's Jill Utter. She's going to give us a little crop update and talk about Maravon and Excellia. Hand it over to you, Jill.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Nicole. Yep, I am Jill Utter. I am the Bsf horticultural rep for Ontario here. Hopefully everybody had the chance to grab a quick coffee, up, energized, ready to go, exciting Bsf stuff. Here's my contact information. I'll throw this slide up at the end as well. I thought today I'd just kind of do a small overview of our two newest fungicides in the apple portfolio. This will be a bit of a similar presentation to last year for whoever it did, but I promise I'll add some insights into what we saw in the field last year with these two beautiful new fungicides, and hopefully we can stir up some really interesting questions. All right, so here's the Bsf Apple portfolio. Lots of really great products in here. We've also added the Maravon product into the guide now as well. And of course, we have those legacy Bsf brands here, right? Apogee, Pristine, as well as some of the newer fungicides like Excellia and Maravon, which we will talk briefly today. Okay, let's jump right into Excellia here. New launch for us in 2020. So we've had this product for a couple of years now. The active ingredient is Revysol. Maybe if there's any guys that do some row crop stuff on the call here too, you've been hearing a little bit about this with the launch of the new brand Altima this year, which has this beautiful group 3 in it. We on the horticulture side of the business have been able to have a look at this for the last couple of years, and it's been really impressive in the field. So just kind of want to do a quick overview and some of the best management practices, just so it's fresh in the noggin heading into this season. The first being that it has this fast and continuous control of a lot of key diseases that we see in palm fruit, stone fruit, which we'll chat a little bit more about as we go along. Excellia moves really quickly into that leaf tissue, so it's really rain fast, which is nice and doesn't wash off. Kind of as you can see in this lab trial here, just demonstrates how quickly it moves into that plant tissue. Just due to the low water solubility of the product, it's really steady, consistent, and durable over long periods of time. You know, remarkably, those small amounts of systemic movement are really sufficient for strong activity on some of those really tough diseases like Scab. So once inside that leaf tissue, it actually sits in these inner leaf reservoirs. And then from there, it's kind of slowly metered out to the rest of the plant, just ensuring protection right from that site of application out. So just kind of demonstrating that here, Sevia is that beautiful green line here, and what we see is that product kind of continuously moving through the leaf slowly, so you're not losing protection at that application site, which is sometimes what we see with some group 3s. You'll lose the accumulation at that application site. Okay, second kind of key attribute here is the control. So again, we've talked about this a little bit this morning, other reps as well. I will always recommend that you put this product on preventatively, but we know things happen, right? You miss an infection period, or it starts raining, you can't get into a certain block that maybe you know needed a little top up on protection. So Sevia does have some post-infection activity in that case scenario. So just kind of to show that here, this is a trial done on grapes to show that post-infection control. You can see that the level here is really good, just in case you get caught in those unpredicted infection periods, and you need a product just to help you out. And last but certainly not least, kind of what makes this group 3 just a little bit different, and that's this unique binding activity. So group 3 is a group 3 is a group 3, right? The way that they work is that it inhibits that one specific enzyme, that C14 dimethylase, which plays a role in a particular sterol production inside the fungal cell. So like other sterols, it's needed for membrane structure and function, and it makes it essential for development of that functional cell wall. So Sevia blocks that C14 dimethylase, inhibits that production, which results in cell membrane disruption, and as a consequence, that fungal cell dies. So commonly with group 3s, what we find is they're kind of repeatedly binding and releasing to that site of action. So definitely a source of potential resistance. With Sevia, it has this really beautiful isopropanol unit here, which actually allows the molecule to flex and bind to that site of action a little bit differently. So here's a little bit of a video just to show that visual for my visual learners here. So you see that molecule flex, and it'll actually hook onto the site of action. There you go. So into the good stuff, registered crops, right? Today we'll cover palm fruit and a little bit of stone fruit for my stone fruit growers out there as well. Initial label here, digging into apples, scab and powdery mildew, bit of a rate range there. Just something to note, Sevia is also registered in the US, and they've been using it at the high rate, which is registered for control of powdery mildew on the label there. Something that we're definitely having a look at here as well. We also have submitted for a little bit of a label expansion on palm fruit for some of the summer diseases. So fingers crossed that we get that for this season, but I'll keep the Lakeside crew kind of apprised of that situation. And as we get that information and that label expansion, we'll send that out to everybody as well. Okay, just kind of having a look at some of the trial data here. Wanted to have a look at this up against some of those really great group 7s that we know are good on apple scab. Sevia is really excellent and definitely something that we saw out in the field this past season. Beautiful little visual there. This trial was actually done in Quebec. They had a pretty heavy scab season. And the Sevia treated block looked really excellent. So had to grab a quick picture of that as well. And apple scab control on leaves, just wanted to have a look at this product against some of our standard multi-active products being used. And again, Sevia is doing a really excellent job. Okay, for my stone fruit folks, really nice label here and very strong on brown rot. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I've got a little unstable internet connection here, but hopefully everything's okay. So just having a look at that brown rot control, doing a really excellent job, and having a look at those group 7s again, really excellent rotation products, especially in peaches. So some of those frequently asked questions, it's a liquid product, which makes it really easy to work with, nice tank mix product. MRL's in place for many countries now, but thankfully most of our apples stay here in Canada. You can absolutely use a surfactant for improved coverage. And of course, please use a non-group 3 in that tank for resistance management and then rotate through those groups as well. Just a quick overview here before I move on to Maravon, fast continuous control of those key diseases, preventative and post-infection control if you need it, but put it on preventatively if possible, and then that unique binding activity to control some biotypes that may have developed resistance. Okay, moving on to Maravon, switching gears here. We launched this product last year and saw some really good things in the field. Really happy with this. They've had this in the US for quite some time now. So we were able to grab some data from there and have a look at it in the field last year as well. It is group 7, group 11, so similar to Pristine, but the difference is that group 7, which is the xenium component, and it's really good efficacy on a broad range of crops and diseases and provides some really good residual protection. And then that group 11 is the pyraclostrobin, which is also in Pristine. And it gives the product really good consistency and helps manage some of those smaller plant stresses that we see throughout the season. A little bit of a sciencey slide here, but just kind of an overview on how this product works. And essentially it shows that this product has really good rain fast, moves really nicely within that plant tissue just to ensure, consistent, continuous control with the added benefit of that improved plant health and stress tolerances. Again, a really nice label here, wide range of diseases for both palm and stone fruit, which I will dig into here. Here's a lovely picture. This was done for Michigan State. Again, they've been working with Maravon for quite a few years now. They have some really good data and information on this product, but just a really excellent scab product. So here's the label, kind of covers a lot of your summer diseases as well. Awesome on scab and powdery mildew. Again, group 11, group 7. So it says more than 2 sequential apps. Would really like to see you rotate between groups. And definitely for resistance management, that's really important. Similar pre-harvest interval and re-entry period to Pristine. We chatted a little bit about this last year, I know, but there's a bit of an asterisk on the label for applying crop oil. This was some work taken from the US as well, where they saw a little bit of a response with one of their trials. So we had quite a bit of this go on last season with some oils and things like that, just to have a look at it with no issues, but just, watch those high temperatures, follow some of those best management practices when it comes to applying your pesticides and your tank mixes. Okay, having a look at apple scab control, really good, really excellent, especially up against some of those standalone group 7s on the market. And this was done in Michigan State as well. But Maravon and Circade is really doing an excellent job here in this trial. And then looking at powdery mildew, again, Maravon really shines, really good on that group 11-7 combination. And then on to stone fruit here, again, a nice deep label here, really good on brown rot as well. Again, kind of what I said before, follow those best management practices when it comes to applying your pesticides and always rotate those groups. So just wanted to throw this up here. I've definitely got a lot of questions over the last year just about, Pristine versus Maravon and the fit. We've definitely used a lot of Maravon or Pristine in the past for brown rot control and storage, but we're actually finding that Maravon has similar, if not a little bit better activity, especially in peaches. Okay, just having a look at that cherry leaf spot as well. Maravon doing a really excellent job. And this trial was done up against a competitor, also a group 11-7 combination. So seeing that it's doing a really excellent job there. Okay, just a bit of an overview before we kind of open up the floor for some burning questions. Maravon, group 7, group 11, really excellent on a wide range of diseases in both stone and palm fruit. Highly rain fast and has that added benefit of plant health and management of some of those minor plant stresses. Awesome. So thank you so much for having me. I'll open up up the floor to some questions. But thanks again for attending and listening in. It's a bit of a long session, but really good information from all of the suppliers and our OMAFRA people and all of the good stuff going on. So thanks to the Lakeside group for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. Looks like we have someone with their hand raised. You can unmute yourself. I gave you the option to talk, Rick, if you'd like. Don't think I can hear you. You have to unmute your microphone. Oh, he just raised his hand accidentally.
No worries at all. That's awesome. Hey, well, thanks again. And if there's any other questions, definitely. Oh, I see one in there. Study control on summer diseases in apples. Bitter rot, but not black rot. That's really interesting. So we are going to apply for something a little bit different here in Canada. Let me just have a look at this. So what we've submitted for some of the summer diseases, but what we saw in the trials actually was really good activity on some of that frog eye leaf spot or black rot. And I didn't see any activity on that other disease mentioned. So that's kind of interesting, something that we'll have a look at. But I think black rot will be more of the target than bitter rot, if that answers the question in a roundabout way.
Yeah, black rot is a pretty difficult disease. There's nothing out there that really does any much. There's a little bit there and there, but getting control on black rot is very difficult in any crop. So far I know, Jill.
Yeah,
if there would be something out there, I would know about it.
Yeah, and that's something that like we find that like Maravon Sevia rotation really nicely. So you've got a group 3 and then you've got your 7 and 11, and it does a pretty excellent job on black rot. So something that we'll definitely have a look at in trials going ahead here. With that crop oil concentrate, yeah, I can repeat that. It's something that they saw in the States. We had a bunch of people put it on this year with some crop oil, no issues, pure spray green, all that stuff. But it's one of those things that I would really watch, you know, those high temperatures and all of the stuff that you put in the tank. Maybe you just put the Maravon and the oil in, and then watch those high temperatures and all of that good stuff as well.
All right,
black
awesome.
rot, if I can say one word to black rot, sorry, is nutrient balance is very important. Potash is very good. I know that has other implication if you get too much potash on apples, right? On the wrong time, especially later. But that's how black rot can be best, I seen at least, or my experience, targeted with the nutrients actually.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Jill. Oh, there's one more question for me.
Yeah, ignite. Yeah, like to see that go on with full sun, hot weather. Some people use it a little bit early, but definitely it does work a little bit better with those warmer temperatures for sure.
If I can throw a comment in there too with Ignite, I find that it, and then the row crop counterpart, Liberty, everything you think about in applying herbicides goes out the window for it, because you want it hot, you want sunlight, you want everything that other herbicides shouldn't have.
Perfect. All righty. So moving on, we have Syngenta's Patricia Cloper up next, and her coworker Hank McGrath. Hopefully I said your last name right, Hank. Hank's based out in BC, and Patricia is our Ontario horticulture rep. Well, you guys take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Lakeside, for hosting a meeting again. Hopefully this time next year we can all be in person, but one benefit to having a webinar this time around is that you don't have to listen to me. We've brought in our BC rep, Hank, who we're lucky enough to have on with us. Hank's been with us for about a year. He is the horticulture specialist in BC. I'm the local one for Western Ontario. And we also have Jocelyn Sales listening in today. She's the local territory sales rep. So lots of folks that you can ask questions to if you have any. And just wanted to throw out a mention that we still have our quick reference guides available. This year we do have a stone fruit one, which is pretty exciting. So we have a bunch of them that we can get over to the Lakeside group. If you're interested, please reach out to us or themselves. And with that, Hank, I will turn it over to you to talk about a couple fun and exciting things.
All right. Can everyone see my screen, or are you seeing my notes screen as well?
It looks great, Hank.
Okay, good. Here we go. All right. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Lakeside, for the invitation. As Patricia said, I'm the horticultural specialist out here in British Columbia. So it's been interesting to hear your chats about ambrosia. We've gone through some of the same issues, and I was just saying to Christy that dormant oil has seemed to be our friend to help with that. But today I want to talk a little bit more about a few new things that we've got in our portfolio, and we'll just get going here. So first thing I wanted to chat with you about is some biologicals that Syngenta is coming out with. And I don't think you can talk about biologicals without sort of reminding everybody what we're talking about here. So remember that there's two kinds of biologicals. There's the biocontrol agents that are out there that are naturally derived elements that can help fungal, bacterial, and insect and nematode control. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a biostimulant. So a biostimulant is something that's applied to trees or plants or roots to help stimulate the plant's natural process with the aim of achieving better growth, right? So if you think of biocontrol, I think the most famous one would be BT, and we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about biostimulants. So some different stuff out there. So Syngenta recently partnered, or I guess many like to say take over, a biological control company called Alagro out of Italy. And we've partnered with them starting in 2020. And this biological control company has been around for 4 years and has lots of experience, and is one of the bigger biostimulant companies in Europe at this point in time. So let's talk a little bit about how biostimulants are developed and created. What we're going to talk about today is a seaweed product. So Ascophyllum nodosum, which is a pretty famous seaweed that has been found off the Norwegian coast, is what we're going to talk about today. So that's the main raw ingredient in our new biostimulant. And it is, if you take a look at the slide here, you can see there's sort of some different kinds of algae that grow on the ocean floor. And what we're looking at is Ascophyllum nodosum, which is grown in that intertidal zone. So the part of the cool part about the Ascophyllum nodosum is that it is immersed in the icy waters during the wintertime and has constant sun in the summertime. And it is in that intertidal zone. So half the day it's exposed and half the day it's not exposed. And when looking at that algae, people went, how does that algae survive? How does that algae make it through these difficult tidal changes every day and still survive and do well, as opposed to sort of more deep algae and that shallow algae? So there's got to be something in that plant, right? There's got to be something that makes that plant really grow, and what is it? So researchers tried to figure it out, and through research and development, they decided to extract as much as they could out of that seaweed and see if it would help plant growth. Now, this is different than other biostimulants that just take seaweed, grind it up, pour it into a bottle, and sell it to you. That's not what we're doing. There are lots of horror stories out there for sure with biostimulants that have been ground up and plug your nozzles and don't do anything. And I know they're out there, and I have an orchard myself, and I've tried them, and I've sworn up and down the road trying to clean out my nozzles. This is not what we're doing at all. So we use some different extraction methods to try and pull out the different products that are, or compounds, if you will, that are in the Ascophyllum nodosum. And here are some of them for those of you that are very science-minded. We use both low and high temperature basic or alkaline extraction methods, and then we use low and high temperature acid extraction methods. And each one of those pulls out a different compound out of the seaweed, and then we take that and move on. So what I mean by moving on is we've extracted all those different products, and we make sure that those products are still viable and working. So we do genomic analysis to make sure that they are true and true to form. We do phenotypical analysis with light, near infrared, UV, and root analysis to make sure that those products are still there and in working form. And of course, the one that's more important, I think, to everybody is we do field testing, right? We have this product and we field test it. We make sure that it works and that we're seeing some kind of benefit to putting this on. And remember, Vilagro has been around in Europe for 40 years, and so a lot of testing has been done there. And we have done some testing early last year with the product here in Canada, all the way across Canada. So we did some in Quebec, we did testing in Ontario, and then I did a lot of testing here with growers in British Columbia. Okay, so let's sort of get into the meat of the matter here. Our new product is Megafold. It is our new biostimulant product, and it is the one that I kind of want to talk about. And I lost my timer, so somebody's going to have to sort of hit me when I get over time here. So Megafold is a liquid fertilizer biostimulant. It helps reduce abiotic stress caused by drought, heat, low temperature, and physical damage. So it does help a lot of that. It does promote vegetative development, and it does help preserve yield in stressful situations, which for me out here in BC, I don't know if you remember, but it was the summer of fire and hottest temperatures in North America. And we had a little bit of that. And for you folks out in Ontario, we had a bit of a cold snap early in the season, and we've got some info on that as well. So if you apply Megafold in stressful situations, what Megafold will do is it will maintain your growth, which is really what you want. You don't want your growth to stop. You want your growth to continue on in a normal fashion and produce normal fruit for you. You don't want to have small fruit. You don't want to have deformed fruit. In normal situations, hopefully, and I'm not sure what normal is anymore. Everybody talks about a normal year, but I'm not really sure what that is anymore. It will increase your growth. And it doesn't take much to increase a box size in apples or a row size in cherries to move into that higher paying category of fruit, which is really what you want to try and do, right? We're all in this to make $1 at the end of the day. So Megafold can be used on many different crops. Of course, we're talking about apples and stone fruits here today. But as you can see by our label, it can be used on many different crops. Total nitrogen value and potassium levels are there. But remember, it's not really a source of that. It is a biostimulant, and it is used to help increase growth. So just some information there on it. Here is the breakdown of the different application timings and rates that we would like you to use it on. Pretty simple to remember, 1 liter per acre. Just put that into your spray tank, and you can see the apple and pear rate there. So we suggest that you start at pre-bloom, you repeat at vegetative growth and fruit set. We've been using seaweed products out here in British Columbia for a long time. We do basically a pink petal fall another 2 applications after that. So 4 applications per season is what we've been doing. And on stone fruits out here in British Columbia, so that would mostly be sweet cherries, it basically goes in the tank every spray. And we did work with that here this season with Megafold, and we had some pretty good results. So remember, Megafold is not your nitrogen source, but it contains vitamins, proteins, betaines, and biomolecules that help the plant overcome that abiotic stress, which we sort of talked about here a little bit. And it also contains amino acids, which help maintain the reserves in the plant. So Megafold has an amino acid glycine, which is directly involved in the formulation of plant tissue and chlorophyll synthesis. Obviously, more chlorophyll, the more photosynthetic ability your plant will have. Okay, so just sort of keep that in mind as we're going through and we're looking at this, right? We're trying to increase fruit size, we're trying to increase fruit set, and we're trying to get the best we can out of our plant. So we also talked about abiotic stress. Well, how does that work? When a plant experiences either heat stress, or, it inhibits protein synthesis. Megafold helps with that. More importantly, though, for you folks out in Ontario, you had that freeze last year. It helps with chilling or freezing, and that it has helped, the Megafold has helped make the plant roughly 8 times more workable or growable, if you will, than untreated plants. So this is some work that Patricia did last year, where Megafold was applied on ginseng. A really positive experience, as you can see on your left-hand side there. Megafold was applied to ginseng, beautiful, healthy plants, as compared to what we would call the grower standard, and just not as healthy and beautiful looking a plant as the one sprayed with Megafold. Out here in BC, what we do is we spray it on cherries, as I said. When you sell a cherry, you're selling a stem with that as well, and it retains that green stem for quite a long period after a really hot, stressful period. When that cherry and stem go to market, and I know everybody's bought cherries. When you go into the store, you look at the stems. If they're brown, they're old. If they're green, they're healthy, and you think they're fresh. That's what we're trying to do. So I want to move on real quickly because I don't have much time left. Talk about Maravon Duo, which is our new fungicide. Well, not new, it's been out for a year here, and I'm just about running out of time, so I'm going to fly through this. So Maravon is our new product with the Diethane. It is a group 3 and a group 7 fungicide. It's a powerful new molecule, right? We've worked with it, controls powdery mildew and brown rot and scab on stone fruits. Right, so the application rate is 0.4 liters per hectare, sprayed 7 to 14 day intervals, 4 sprays per season. Beauty with this is that it has a 0 day PHI for those of you that have to get in there and pick your stone fruits real quickly, and a 12-hour REI. Just some of its control on brown rot versus untreated. You can see that it works very well on both brown rot and scab incidents in stone fruits. And 2 kind of timings that we want you to put it on at is during pink or bloom time, which is when a lot of people put it on for brown rot control, and then right before harvest to get you into your post-harvest situation. So with that, I will stop, and hopefully I've made it on time.
Perfect. I'm just going to check the chat and see if there's any questions. For cold events, does Megafold need to be applied before or after?
So for cold events, mean, ideally, it would be better if you put it on before, but maybe Patricia can talk about how she did it with her ginseng this season.
For sure. So in the ginseng situation, we had originally applied for frost, and we applied after the cold event, the one major cold event, but before a second smaller cold event. The first one was -5, the second one was -2. And we still saw a benefit to that. It will work better because it's had a chance to stimulate natural processes in the plant before the cold happens to help better withstand that cold. But especially when we're getting these multiple little cold chills, which we seem to be getting more often, if you miss the first one, I still think there's benefit in putting that next one on. The key being is you do need a little bit of leaf material there in order to absorb the Megafold. The more leaf tissue, the better the effect that you'll see. And especially if we're going early in the season, you might want to shorten or push a little bit earlier on your Megafold applications if you're getting a lot of new tissue coming out. So it might be you apply it 1 week, and if you're still seeing chilling events 2 weeks later, you might want to shorten up that respray interval just to get the most benefit from it.
All right, I think that's it for questions. I'll hand it over to you, Friedhelm.
Yes, okay. Now I introduce quickly Guy Silla, and I need to talk a minute about that, how we get somebody from Israel here. So when you know irrigation and fertilizer details, specials are coming out of Israel mostly. So drip irrigation was invented there, for example. As we are very much into fertility and the 4 Rs, we went to Israel to look for knowledge, and there's a lot of knowledge. And Guy is one of these capacities, and he can introduce himself a little bit better than I can do that. So that's why we have a very good connection. We use software from there and the knowledge, so it's a wonderful addition for us and to learn a lot. So today we have Guy here, and I turn over to Guy. Guy.
Thanks. Thank you, Friedhelm. Hello, everybody. I'm Guy Silla. I'm here from Israel. I think Friedhelm, you presented me pretty well. I'm an agronomist in my profession. In the past 20 years, I've been in the agtech industry, developing technologies, mainly software, AI technologies for agriculture. My specialty is fertilization and irrigation, plant nutrition and irrigation. And today I'm going to talk briefly. I have just 20 minutes, a quick talk about fertigation as a precision agriculture technology. So let me just share my screen for a second. All right. So just to align everybody on fertigation, although I'm sure that everybody knows what fertigation is, but fertigation is simply delivering fertilizers through the irrigation water. So if we have an irrigation water set up, an irrigation system set up in the field, and we want to apply fertilizers through this irrigation system, then that's basically a fertigation. Now, fertigation by itself is not a new technology. I mean, drip systems were invented, I think, in the 60s. And fertilizers were applied through water through by, for instance, a fertilizer tanks and other means. But it has advanced a lot in the recent years, and there are more and more technologies that for fertigation, and addition also technologies that support fertigation and that allow for a better precision. So today, fertigation is a key tool